objectors. The first I have on my list, and I hope he will be there, is Alexander Bernhuber. Alexander, you have the floor.
Mr. Bernhuber, can you please press the speak button?
Sorry, okay. Sorry, I think now it's working.
Yes.
Sehr geehrter Herr Vorsitzender, sehr geehrter Vertreter der Europäischen Kommission.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to speak on the issue of a lead gunshot near wetlands. We have developed an objection. The European Commission is seeking to prohibit the use of lead gunshot. This is very much in accordance with the agreement of the conservation of African Eurasian migratory water birds. We believe that the principles governing such an approach are generally agreed with, but we also recognize that lead gunshot can lead to problems of birds with digestion, etc. But the specifics give rise to problems. For example, the 100-meter buffer zone. That area is in no way linked to the definition of the wetland. So there is a problem with the definition of wetlands. It's very difficult to define the actual area being covered. The 100-meter buffer zone for the use of lead shot is extremely complicated. That would create a 3-hectare buffer zone, and that's not implementable in practice. There are numerous other problems which would have unintentional consequences. For example, sport hunting, where there are specific rules. There's also problems with ski resorts. So the unintentional consequences of the draft need to be considered. So there are a number of issues that have been thrown up. So our wish would be to raise an objection to the points I've mentioned. There are individual points which need to be reviewed and improved. So I'm sure that in the future we can improve this regulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bernhuber, also for sticking to your time. Very much appreciated. We will go to the next objector of this one, and that's André Knotek from Renew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everybody. This is not a typical standard objection. We don't debate whether it is good or bad to use lead gunshot over wetlands. No one questions the environmental essence of the proposed measures. This objection questions the implementation, as most impacted part of public considers proposed measures as unworkable, unpractical, and far from real life. We shall listen to public and reflect their feedback. No matter that the European Commission is confident about proposed measures and can argue with number of court decisions and paragraph, we simply cannot go on if the public is not on board. Especially, as I said, if we talk only about the implementation and no one questions the environmental essence of proposed measures. It is in place to support this objection and to invite European Commission to re-architect the implementation together with hunters, together with farmers, together deal with people according to real life and not the other way around. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we move on to the third objector from ECR, Andrei Slabakov.
Grazie Presidente. Cari colleghi, non ripeterò quanto già detto sull'argomento.
Thank you. I won't be repeating what's already been said. I'll just underline that today we do have a responsibility to protect citizens. And that applies to these new rules as well. We probably won't be able to convince the entire group, but I hope that there will be votes in favour of this objection and that we can take into account the views of hunters. The initial opinions that were given have not been taken up by the Commission, but I do believe it's important to take into account rules of good governance and the needs of citizens. We do need to protect waterbirds, that is true, but there are already national measures in place to do such things. Instead of harmonizing the rules, instead of simplifying procedures, what the Commission is attempting to do is undermine the effective working of national administrations in this area. The Ramsar Convention has been transposed into many national legislations, and it's very important that states be allowed to duly implement the provisions of this convention. The Commission seems to be somewhat arbitrary in the adoption of its approach, and I hope very much that it will reconsider its position and not violate the rights of European citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we go to the fourth objector from ID, Marco Dreosto.
Grazie Presidente, saluto anch'io tutti I colleghi. Prima di...
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of the colleagues with us today. I would like to thank the rapporteur, Mr. Slabakov, as well as Mr. Bernhuber, for the EPP and everybody who has contributed to objecting to this proposal. We have a very poor connection and we've lost the image, unfortunately. The image has returned, but there's still a very poor sound quality, but the interpreters will attempt to continue. So, as the ID rapporteur, we have objected from the very outset, and we've tried to sound the alarm right up until September in an attempt to come up with a new proposal. This objection is not linked to the use of lead shot in the area of waterlands, or rather, and that's not the issue that we're raising here. This regulation, from a legal point of view, is simply not the right instrument, and therefore we don't believe that it can be applied. Our draft resolution points out the difficulties this regulation raises from a technical and a legal point of view. What is also at stake here is the issue of proportionality. This regulation addresses only the use of gunshot, but doesn't take into account other sources of lead. The Ramsar Convention has been mentioned and the legal impact of that. But in order to be in accordance with that, this regulation does need to be adapted. So, in conclusion, the agency raised issues which the Commission has not taken up. I think that the objectives are something that should be accepted by all citizens, regardless of political alignment, and I hope parliamentarians will vote in favour of this objection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please make sure, everybody, that the connection is proper, because then the interpreters can interpret correctly. That was quite difficult with the previous speaker. I hope the connection will be better for everyone. I will now take a catch the eye, so all the other people that would like to speak, please everyone stay within 2 minutes so that everyone can speak. I have on the list. I will first take people from the groups that have not spoken yet, and then I will do a new round with all the political groups again. So from who have not spoken yet, from S&D, I give the floor now to Maria Arena.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Oui, je pense que vous m'entendez.
I hope you can hear me. No, I haven't heard that you can yet. Good, thank you. We're all aware of the dangers of lead, and I don't think anybody contests the need to limit it in order to protect our health and biodiversity. But allow me to come back to some of the points raised. The definition used by the Commission, we are being told, is not precise. But it is that which is accepted by the Ramsar Convention, identifying the criteria for the identification of wetlands, many of which are clearly identified in member states. And a mapping of those areas which are not yet identified would enable hunters to be certain. Points F and G, the burden on hunters, well, that's not recognizing the Article 3 of REACH, which prohibits the possession of harmful substances. And these allow for further provisions to cover all possibilities requiring attention. The non-toxic alternatives do exist, and they are available at a similar price to lead. That is the Hunters Associations who say that, and they are also in favour of non-toxic gunshot. So I would invite you to vote against these two objections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the Greens, I have Martin Häusling.
This is Martin Häusling from the Renew, not Martin Häusling from the Greens, so you can.
Clearly, I have to work on my pronunciation. So it's Martin Häusling from the Greens that I would like to give the floor.
Yes, apologies. Mr. Häusling, can you please press the speak button? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, we've had this confusion once before as well. Now, I'm really shocked with some of these objections. We have international agreements to avoid this kind of lead poisoning, and then now we suddenly have this objection. So I really can't follow the argumentation. Let me recall, 1 million wild birds simply die of lead poisoning in wetlands. And so this is something we should have done 20 years ago. So I would have been very happy to discuss this so that we could have a lead prohibition over everywhere, not just in wetlands. And it's been said quite clearly, you don't have to use lead shot anymore. I don't know why the hunters are against using an alternative. And I think the argumentation is something I can't support. And to be very cautious in my wording, it's very difficult to hear the speaker. When we say these wetlands aren't clearly defined, well, I think this is just a false argumentation that the definition isn't clear. There's no doubt as to what these wetlands are. And this question of lead ammunition has to be permitted in the wetlands. Well, you have to then actually catch the hunter in the act of shooting with the lead ammunition. Well, I think these are all pretenses. And I think it's very clear that, for example, that you just simply say sport shooting. Well, you don't just have impact on the animals, but there in that context, you actually have potential damage to human health as well. So we simply need a complete prohibition of lead ammunition, and I just don't think this argumentation holds. And I think we should not let this maneuver go forward. And at the next debate, I think we need to have a complete prohibition of lead ammunition and not sort of just raise these objections that aren't leading anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now for GUE, I have Mike Wallace.
Hello. Sorry. Thanks, Bas. Yeah, I'm in favour of banning lead gunshot over wetlands because it's toxic and it's an unsafe substance. Now, there is a lot of confusion in relation to the proposed ban, and some of it has been created by some of the hunter organisations. They're trying to make the argument that if a farmer has a puddle in his yard, that he won't be able to use any lead shot of any sort. And that's not true. There's actually there will be strict guidelines on it, and some people have a vested interest in creating confusion about it. The ban is based on the Ramsar Convention definition, which relates to wetlands of international importance. Article 24 of the draft regulation explains that this definition is being used because the Ramsar Convention has developed a classification system for wetland types to help in the identification of wetlands. And I mean, the Commission themselves have said that national authorities may find it appropriate to issue guidance to shooters on how the definition of wetlands and wetland boundaries shall be correctly interpreted in line with the objectives of the measure. And the objective of the measure is to protect waterbirds. So, therefore, wetlands will be identified and mapped. Now, I mean, strictly speaking, the regulation will not apply to farmers. It will apply to hunters who want to shoot waterbirds. I think it's disingenuous, a lot of the scaremongering going on, and I think this is a positive move to ban the gunshot over wetlands. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I now take some additional, now all the groups have spoken, so now I take additional catch the eyes. I will close the list now, so we don't take any further people on the speaking list. I don't have anyone more from EPP or S&D, so I move to Renew, and Billy Kelleher has the floor.
Can you hear me? Yes. Just at the outset, I also wish to support the objection. I primarily do so because of the fact that it is a badly drafted regulation. It is not proportional. It certainly is not clear as to the definitions of wetlands beyond the Ramsar Convention in terms of pooling of water in very heavy rainfall. And bearing in mind Nordic countries, a lot of the Eastern Northern European countries and Ireland itself would have very heavy rainfalls from time to time, and you certainly could end up with situations where people could be criminalised for carrying lead ammunition. Now, I just want to put on the record that the Ramsar Convention is clearly defining wetlands, but beyond that, it is a huge challenge when you are talking about pooling of water, lodging of water in land that traditionally wouldn't be wetland. The issue of the health of people clearly must be a priority, and I believe that there should be a phasing out of lead shot, but it should be done in a way that is fair and proportional, and in the meantime does not criminalise people. A reference has been made as primarily hunters. Farmers are also people that would use lead shot during harvest times or in advance of harvest to protect their crops, and this particular measure may not allow that to happen. So I would ask that it would be referred back to the European Chemicals Agency, that the Commission would take into account their recommendations about a phasing out, and that it would be done in a way that's proportional, fair, and doesn't criminalise people that would be carrying lead gunshot in the meantime, and more importantly, bring forward a proposal to phase out lead shot longer term to protect wetland migratory birds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no one from ID, so I move to from the Greens, Jutta Paulus.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Dear objectors, I am not sure whether you have actually read the briefing which ECHA kindly has written, taking care of the points that you raised in your objection, because if you had read it, you would be probably blushing with embarrassment, because every single point that you raise in your objections is clearly ruled out by what ECHA writes. That concerns the definitions of wetland, that concerns the way that ammunition can be used or is not used. For example, police usually does not carry shotguns. I haven't ever seen a policeman with a shotgun, fortunately. And I do think that 20 years after this agreement has actually been signed, it is high time that we ban the use of neurotoxic substances in very endangered and very sensitive ecosystems. And I would like to side in with Martin Häusling, saying it's high time to ban all use of lead in ammunition, which is, for example, done in the United States. I have not heard of hunters being hunting being abolished in the United States, and I think Europe should take this step better sooner than later. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I move on to the ECR, and I have Pietro Fiocchi.
Mr. Fiocchi, can you please press the speak button?
Hello. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I've been part of the banning of lead in the United States some 30 years ago, and the problem with this regulation that it'll be extremely difficult to do the law enforcement on it. Consider also that the US legislation was quite smart, because it was not just banning lead, but it was also recuperating thousands and thousands of hectares of wetlands. So it's not sufficient to ban lead if we want to save the species, the migratory species, the ducks and geese. Now, keep in mind that also this regulation has an impact on target shooting. Even the facility, they recycle 100% of their lead and plastic. So it would be very unfair to the sports shooter in Europe. Last, I'm in favor of banning lead in the wetlands, but let's do an effort to write a fair and a good regulation. And this one is not a fair one and is not a good one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have from the GUE, Anja Hazekamp.
thank you, Bas. It is not often that I can name my country, the Netherlands, as a good example, but we have a ban on the most uses of toxic lead gunshots in place for over 25 years. And sadly, not all countries have banned archaic and devastating use of a non-threshold poison. And it is high time they do so. I welcome this first step to ensure that at least the vulnerable wetlands will not no longer be exposed to this toxic substance, and that we will prevent that lead will no longer be penetrating these precious ecosystems. But indeed, it is just the first step we need to take, and it is very clear that we need to get rid of lead in all applications and all uses, including all gunshots in the entire European Union. And I'm curious to hear the timeline that the Commission foresees, and I like to encourage some more ambition on this point. I also worry that a buffer zone of 100 meters is not enough, as those gunshots can easily reach 250 meters. It is very clear that the guns lobby is fiercely resisting these much-needed changes, but despite their commitments to phase out the use of lead gunshots in the vulnerable wetlands already since 2009, more than 10 years later, they are still trying to keep the status quo of the toxic ages. Dear colleagues, we cannot give in to their bullying and false arguments. I urge everyone to support this small step towards a non-toxic environment. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and I'll try to do another round in order to give as many people the possibility. From Renew, I have Martin Hoschik.
Thank you, Bas, and now it's the right person with the right name. Yes, I would like to also support the ban on the use of gunshots, so oppose this objection. I'm not going to repeat, and I think the definition of the Ramsar Convention regarding the wetlands, including the puddles, is quite clear. And it's down to the member states. It's not Commission saying on how to in detail implement it. So this is where it's very clear that it's not some evil Brussels setting up on how each country should deal with this restriction. It is down to the responsibility of every single government, including the possibility. I'm very happy to hear that the objectors have this goal in mind to ban the use of lead in gunshots entirely. Just like very wet Denmark, very wet Netherlands already have done. And in terms of the enforceability and the buffer zone, I would like to say two things. One thing, the scientific, and as a coordinator for the ECA, we have to listen to the science. The scientific recommendation there was 300 meters. The Commission went for the lowest common denominator of the requests from the member states, which was 100 meters. And as the colleague from Germany, one of the objectors said, it's not enforceable. Well, in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, there is already 400-meter buffer zone around the wetlands where this ban is enforced. It's possible in even larger scale. Schleswig-Holstein has a complete ban on use of the lead gunshots. And myself, coming from a hunter family, and during the youth being one in the youth hunters club, not having shot, but that was the way you did nature conservation during the socialism. I think this is fully possible and fully enforceable, and something which, with the right support for transitions, the hunters and farmers can do easily. I believe that the change is possible, and it's needed for the sake of not just the bird, but the human health as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the Greens, I still have Ville Niinisto.
Thank you, Chair. This is not a question what we think about hunting and the future of hunting. There are alternatives for hunting. This is a question whether we will stop the use of a toxic substance that affects the nervous system and kills 1 million birds in Europe annually, and we allow this substance to go into our nature in huge amounts today. And this has to be stopped. There are alternatives for hunting, but for birds, this is a life or death question. And also, also we have to remember that lead piles up in the food chain. So in Finland, white-tailed eagle, one of the big profile symbols of nature protection in Finland, an endangered eagle, one of the main causes of the death of white-tailed eagle is and has been the use of lead and lead piling up in their body. So we have to address this question, and there are alternatives for the hunters. In wetlands in Europe, 4,000 tons of lead go into nature in the wetlands annually. This is a lot more than the whole European industry lets into the nature. It's only 500 tons in industry. So we have addressed other sources of lead. Now it's the question of addressing lead from hunting, and this regulation is about environment protection. There has always been objection about environment protection in the past. This is not a practical way of doing it, but in the end, it's a moral question whether we want to stop killing our birds and letting poisonous substances go into nature. We have alternatives and we can make the implementation work. So I very much urge you to support this regulation and oppose the objection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from ECR, I still have Sergio Bellato.
Mr. Berlato, can you please press the speak button?
Eccomi. Buongiorno Presidente.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to use part of my time to discuss the usefulness of applying the Commission proposal. I would like to, but this isn't the time or the place for that. I would just like to support the objections to reject the Commission's approach, which is wrong in the scope and merit. It doesn't take into account the opinion of the European Chemicals Association or Agency. Sorry, we feel that this Commission text is designed to unfairly and without motivation to penalize a certain category who want to protect the environment, and they've already shown that they're willing to do this by the creation of wetlands, and they haven't limited themselves to preaching environmentalism, but practice it every day. Often the aquatic species are finding a habitat precisely because of work done by the farmers and all of those who work on the rural environment. We feel that this proposal would infringe on a fundamental principle. That is, it's important to correctly apply the rules without creating uncertainty in law and possibility for dispute. In 2007, we have a decree in Italy which bans the use of munitions in wetlands, but it does not define the way in which this is done, and that's something that the Commission is trying to do. So we would agree with the objection and ask everyone to vote to reject the Commission proposal, and inviting them to reword it, bearing in mind the requirements of the various categories involved throughout the territory. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I still take two now. I please ask them to stay within a minute because I think the arguments have been exchanged, but I do want to give you also the possibility to still speak. From Renew, I have Véronique Trillet-Lenoir.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, we need to remember that lead is a toxic substance. Toxic for human beings, women, pregnant women, children, toxic for birds who mistake it for food, and toxic for other birds who then eat the other birds and the humans who eat the birds. So it's toxic for the environment. So it's a problem of human health, animal health, and global health. For many years, we've been trying to do our utmost to eliminate lead in our pipes, our paints, and our toys, and this is something we need to continue working towards. There are alternatives for this substance. I do understand that this is a very technical problem, and even if I am very much against this objection, I do agree with those who say that we need to have clear, simple and understandable measures. I would propose the total elimination of lead shot in munitions. That would be clear, simple and easy to understand.
Thank you very much. And from ECR, I still have Mr. Tertsch.
Mr. Tertsch, can you please press the speak button? Mr. Tertsch, can you hear me? Can you please press the speak button?
Sí.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Ahora, sí, digo que yo apoyo.
Good morning. I'd like to support the objections to the Commission's proposal of expanding this without any sort of impact assessment or study. They doesn't take into account when everyone agrees on replacing lead and that in the medium term we have to have a clear references and framework which is not provided in these new restrictions. We have some farmers and hunters who still use this type of munition, and this might cause some serious problems for them. So I would agree with those who object to this and invite the Commission to review the scope and of its proposal and reword it in a different way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and that gives us a nice bridge to the Commission. Apologies for the Commission to have limited time, so you will have 3 minutes, but I'm sure in those 3 minutes you can give the key arguments from a Commission's perspective. I give the floor to Mr. Carlo Pettinelli.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And honourable members, the Commission is convinced of the urgent need to restrict lead shot in wetlands because undeniably lead shot is highly toxic to humans and wildlife. The ECHA agency estimates that 4,000 to 5,000 tons of lead are released each year into wetlands from shooting with lead gunshot. This is a huge quantity. For comparison, industrial emissions of lead are estimated at around 500 tons per year. So this measure will reduce the lead pollution significantly. Suitable alternatives are widely available and already used, so the impact on hunters, farmers, and shooters in general will be minimal, as shown by the experience of member states that have already banned lead shot. This proposal is an ideal measure to meet the aims of the Green Deal and the zero pollution ambition, the recently adopted sustainable technical strategy, and the biodiversity strategy, initiatives that were welcomed and supported by the European Parliament. Furthermore, the reduction of pollution will save the lives of around 1 million water birds each year in wetlands, and possibly another 1 to 2 million bears outside the wetlands. It will also protect people with its game meat from possible lead poisoning. Let me also remind that already today, 23 member states have national provisions in place, including total bans. For example, Denmark or the Netherlands, the Flemish region of Belgium, or some landers in Germany. Last but not least, our proposal honors the agreement on the conservation of African Eurasian migratory water birds, signed by the European Union and 23 of its member states, and harmonizes the several national rules regulating the use of lead gunshot in wetlands, ensuring a consistent level of protection of migratory water birds across borders. We believe in the importance of the evidence-based policy. This is why our proposal is heavily based on ECHA scientific assessment. We choose to use the Ramsar definition of wetlands as proposed by ECHA because it is comprehensive and internationally recognized. After all European member states are members of the Ramsar Convention. Limiting the definition would make the restriction significantly less effective. Member states may help the implementation by issuing maps of wetlands or guidance on how the proposed definition of wetlands should be applied on their territory, in line with the objective of the measure and the principle of proportionality. Buffer zones are necessary to prevent a spent lead shot from falling into wetlands and being ingested by bears. The ECHA's Committee for Risk Assessment did recommend buffer zones, even though they did not quantify them. The provision to carry the shot in wetlands facilitates enforcement, as it is obviously difficult to catch someone in the act of shooting. And our measures do not reverse the presumption of innocence. On the contrary, it gives those carrying the shot the opportunity to show they were merely crossing wetlands, not shooting there. So actually, it helps to ensuring the proportionality of the restriction, a proportionality which was also confirmed by the ECHA opinion. It is also important to clarify.
Sorry, apologies. I said you have 3 minutes and you are almost at 4 minutes. So sincere apologies to cut you off, but we do have to move on to the next topic. And I did ask you to stay within the 3 minutes. So I hope you gave your most important arguments, and apologies for cutting you off, but we do have to move on the agenda. Because we still have one further discussion on objections before we have the Commissioner, who will be here at 10 o'clock. The votes on this objection will be after I open up the vote around 11:15. Thank you all, everyone, and I quickly move on to the next topic.